Israel says its army is ending its intensive ground operation phase in Gaza after gaining control over the northern part of the territory. Can Ukraine change the course of the war as world leaders, including China, gather for peace talks in Davos?
European Parliament President Metsola is confident mainstream parties can ward off a far-right surge in the upcoming elections.
Rebuilding trust, the theme for this year's World Economic Forum that's kicked off in Davos.
Yemen Houthi rebels fire missiles at U.S. warships in the Red Sea, responding to recent attacks carried out by the United States and the United Kingdom.
Enough is enough. Farmers return to the German capital in the tens of thousands to protest against the government's plans to slash diesel subsidies.
Israel says its army is ending its intensive ground operation phase in Gaza after gaining control over the northern part of the territory. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant added the military will soon expand its control over the southern part of the strip as well. The briefing came as Hamas issued unsubstantiated claims that 2 Israeli hostages had died in Israeli shelling. Gallant went on to justify Israel's strategy in Gaza.
אם תיפסק האש, יחרץ גורלם של החטופים לשנים ארוכות בשבי החמאס. ללא הלחץ הצבאי, איש לא ידבר איתנו. ללא הלחץ הצבאי, לא נצליח להגיע לשום הסכמות. רק מעמדה של כוח ניתן לשחרר את החטופים.
Images released by an NGO show Burej refugee camp razed to the ground after Israeli forces withdrew. The UN continues to complain that access to aid deliveries of medical supplies, fuel, water and sanitation equipment to northern Gaza has been denied several times in a row since late December.
While there have been some steps to increase the flow of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, life-saving relief is not getting to people who have endured months of relentless assault at anywhere near the scale needed.
Almost 85% of the population are reported to have fled their homes. Former President Donald Trump has made a strong, decisive start in the race for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Projections had him easily taking Iowa, leaving his closest rivals far behind. A clear victory is crucial as Trump reinforces his grip on his party at the outset of the GOP's nomination fight. Rivals, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, were left competing for second place. The pair knew Iowa would not be a successful canvassing ground. New Hampshire, the next state, has far more independent voters. Despite bone-chilling weather, the public endured the life-threatening cold and dangerous driving conditions to participate in meetings that unfolded in hundreds of schools, churches and community centres across the state. But the message of the night has been unmistakable. Trump's nomination to become the Republican Party's presidential candidate for a third consecutive time is his to lose.
China, the European Union, Ukraine and the United States. These are the countries that will present their view on how to rebuild trust. Chinese Premier, Ukraine's President, the US National Security Advisor and the European Commission President are all in Davos at the World Economic Forum annual meeting on Tuesday. The big question is whether China's Premier will sit down with Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine's allies. China was not attending Ukraine's peace formula talks on Sunday at the National Security Advisors level. Could Kyiv change this and bring on board one of Russia's closest allies? Sasha Vakulina for Euronews from Davos.
Combating climate change is one of the major themes here in Davos, and in fact, reaching net zero by 2050 is one of the main goals of the European Union. That's why the European Commission has its EU climate law. It's also presented its European Green Deal with a tsunami of various plans and regulations that will impact business and consumers in the next few decades. But what has changed now compared to back in 2019 when the European Green Deal was presented is the political climate. We're no longer seeing, for example, the Friday for Futures marchers out on Fridays. The Greta Thunberg movement has also silent, and also politically across the continent of Europe, the Greens are not doing as well as they would have hoped. For more on what she hopes will be changing regarding that topic here at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, we spoke to Joa Mehta. She's the co-founder of Stop Ecocide International.
For the first time, we've been invited to actually contribute to the conference itself. I'm going to be speaking on a couple of panels, and I'm going to be talking, of course, about ecocide law, which is the recognition of mass damage to nature as a crime, a serious crime.
And what about the topic in general politically? Are you concerned slightly about the fact that, the Greta Thunberg movement has died out a bit, the Fridays for Future movement has died out, and also politically, the Greens are not doing so well, and we've elections this year, and people perhaps won't be voting with these issues on their mind?
I have to say I'm not particularly worried about that, because when we look at how things are developing, both in various national jurisdictions but also regionally, for example at the EU and globally, we're seeing a clear legislative direction of travel. People are moving towards this recognition of ecocide, and I think that's partly, in a sense you could say that conversation was triggered by things like the school strikes movement and those sort of climate protests. But I think what it's made people understand or realise is that we're lacking that external framework for safety going forward into the future. It almost doesn't matter what solutions we put in place if we don't prevent the mass destruction of ecosystems. None of those are going to work long term.
Joa Mehta there, remaining optimistic despite the lack of progress made in Dubai before Christmas at the COP28. Eve McMahon, Euronews, Davos.
Doctors and dentists in Slovenia are taking industrial action after the failure of pay talks. The FIDE's trade union of health workers are launching a general strike after talks with the government bore no fruit following a one-day token strike on Tuesday. The stoppage will last until cancellation or until a pay agreement is reached. Pay for doctors in Slovenia is among the lowest in the European Union. Slovenia is among the bottom 6 for pay levels.
2024 will be an essential year in the EU because of the European Parliament elections. Its President Roberta Metsola, speaking with Euronews at the first plenary session of the year, appealed to all Europeans to vote next June and back pro-European forces instead of populist and extremist parties.
These 5 years that have just passed have not been easy. The next 5 years will not be any easier. But democracy requires that you choose. And if you choose, you have a responsibility. Where do you want Europe to go? Europe will be facing big challenges. Populism, extremism, intolerance. But Europe has shown itself to be unprecedentedly united over the past years. Let's continue on that track, and only citizens can choose that to go forward.
Metsola believes the parliament found unity in the center during the last term, when the Conservatives, Socialists, Liberals and Greens managed to form a majority, but this could change after the upcoming vote. Are you worried about the rise of the far right across Europe?
I'm worried that if we don't, as part of the pro-European constructive, I would call it majority in the centre, appeal to our voters, then our voters will feel like they have no choice, that they have to retreat to the fringes, to those people who want to destroy rather than to build. So rather than talk about a fear, I would talk about the challenge that we all have, a responsibility that we all have in order to convince citizens to vote for us, who are at the centre, pro-European, who want Europe to continue to grow, to be integrated further.
The elections come after the so-called Qatargate, probably the biggest scandal in the history of the EU institutions. Do you think this can undermine the people's trust in the EU?
I want the next mandate, the new members of the European Parliament, to be reassured that the structures are strong and that our rules are observed. We have done a lot of work in the past year, and I would like us to be judged on that rather than the actions of some allegations with regards to a small number of individuals.
Thank you. Thanks
a lot.
Happy New Year.
For most of the year, Davos is a popular ski resort in the Swiss Alps. But for 7 days a year, it becomes a global summit, attracting leaders from the public and private sector. On the agenda this year, geopolitics, climate change, the future of AI. The motto, rebuilding trust.
Some would link the erosion of trust to the deep transformations that we are seeing all around us, be they technological, geopolitical, societal, or those related to climate and nature. And some would also say that all these transformations taken together have ushered in if not a completely new era, at least a stark new reality.
What's striking about this gathering is that the main shopping street here in Davos village transforms into an open-air trade fair. In fact, the majority of business representatives around here don't even have an access patch to the main Congress Centre.
My name is Teku. We are here with the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, and we are looking for allies who want to join us in the protection of one of the most biodiverse regions in the world.
What brought me to Davos? Broad networking. I'm a biotech and a digital health founder and investor. So I've got a large ecosystem of people I'm going to meet.
My name is Rania, and I am a high school student from the United States, and I came to just intern and help out some of my family friends here.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the Secretary General of NATO Jens Stoltenberg, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Ukraine's President Zelensky, some of the main political headliners that will be passing through Davos this week. Whether or not they manage to reach that goal, that motto of rebuilding trust, remains to be seen. Maeve McMahon, Euronews, Davos.
Yemen Houthi rebels have fired missiles at U.S. warships in the Red Sea, responding to attacks carried out by the United States and the United Kingdom since Thursday. The attack on Sunday marks the first U.S. acknowledged fire by the Houthis, following weeks of assaults on shipping in the Red Sea. UK Defence Secretary has said that he is monitoring the situation very closely. If the attacks don't stop, we will then have to take the necessary measures, he said.
Their behaviour in the Red Sea was completely unacceptable, and we'll keep a very close eye. If we have to take further action, then that's something that we would consider. But our intention was to have a very clear message sent to the Houthis, which I think is what has been achieved thus far.
UK and US Navy repel largest, most complex Houthi attack in the Red Sea. Since October 17, 2023, Iranian-backed Houthi militants have attempted to attack and harass multiple ships and international shipping lanes.
10,000 farmers gathered in the heart of Berlin to protest against the German government's plan to cut agricultural diesel subsidies. Although the government backtracked and promised to reduce these subsidies over the next 2 years before ending them in 2026, farmers say this is not enough.
Prinzipiell kann man erstmal vorwegnehmen, dass wir Bauern natürlich am liebsten völlig ohne Subventionen arbeiten würden. Jeder möchte ja gerne für das Produkt, was er produziert, fair bezahlt werden und sag mal, die Möglichkeit haben, von dem Verdienst daraus auch gut zu leben. Jetzt ist es aber so, dass wir in Deutschland ja schon seit vielen Jahren Umweltauflagen erfüllen oder auch Maßnahmen zum Tierschutz ergreifen, die uns im weltweiten Wettbewerb natürlich nach hinten schmeißen, da ja andere Länder mit viel geringeren Standards viel geringere Kosten haben.
The German Farmers Association said the end of these subsidies could spell the end for agriculture in Germany.
Also tatsächlich haben wir einen Strukturwandel, also ein Höfesterben von jährlich 2-3%. Das wird natürlich im Moment dominiert, auch durch die EU-Subventionen, die falsch verteilt werden. Wenn wir jetzt von heute auf morgen alle Subventionen streichen würden, dann würden sicherlich viele Betriebe sagen, das hat keine Perspektive mehr und meine Kinder sollen diesen Job nicht mehr machen. Und auf der anderen Seite haben wir aber eine ganz starke Bindung auch von Landwirten, ihre Höfe weiterzumachen und den Wunsch weiterzumachen.
Experts argue that focusing more on the European market rather than global competition would benefit everyone, especially the farmers.
German farmers are not just angry about agricultural diesel cuts. They say the policies from the EU and Germany, which they're dependent on, can change at a moment's notice, making it almost impossible to plan long term. Liv Stroud in Berlin for Euronews.